Hey there, my people. By way of a heads up, you know I have allergies, and so I'm a bit stuffy and the voice is a bit raspy. Now, having put that disclaimer out there, I have for your viewing pleasure an episode from the old throwback TV series, One Step Beyond. Now, peeps, if you will remember, this TV series claimed that the stories were taken from real-life events, real-life, supernatural, paranormal occurrences and events. And that's what made One Step Beyond a must-watch TV program for me. Now, in this episode, a wealthy nobleman offs his wife and marries the mistress. However, he is soon tormented by a mysterious stain on the wall that eerily looks like his unalived wife's face. All right, my people, that's the setup. Now let's get to it.
I hardly know what to tell you about the next half hour, except that it has been reported as true. It has been investigated, and no one, as yet, has been able to explain it or disprove it.
The scene opens in a church, and there's a funeral going on. The priest is talking, and there's an organ playing solemnly in the background. And also in the background is this loud sobbing going on. After a couple of minutes, the husband gets up and goes to the back. This chick is standing there, peeps, going, "Jeanette, boo-hoo, Jeanette." Now, this chick that's keeping up all this noise, that's the mistress. Okay? And the Oscar goes to Charlotte, the mistress, performing at the funeral. Okay, let's continue. Not very long afterwards, we're at the church again, this time for a wedding. Sister girl looks like she just hit the lottery, while brother man, he looks like he's being led to the gallows. Next, we see that the happily wedded couple have made their way back to the estate, and they're greeted by the butler. He says, "Monsieur le Marquis," with a little bow because he's greeting this nobleman of the house, and he says, "Madame," to Charlotte, who's quick to correct him, and she says, "Madame le Marquis." The butler says, of course, with a bow, "Madame le Marquis," and her husband, Jacques, leans over and says, "He meant no disrespect, my dear." And he looks at the butler and says, "We'll take a light luncheon in the drawing room." Jacques walks off, and Charlotte says to the butler, "It's only for two, a small reception." And she asks the butler, "What are you called?" And he responds, "My name is Ernest." And she says,
"I have seen large strawberries on the table here when I came to visit in the past. I would like some of those. A lot. A big plate."
Very well, Madame la Marquise.
Madame la Marquise.
Madame la Marquise. Peeps, this chick is in hog heaven. Did you just hear what she said? She saw these giant strawberries when she was there before, fake being a friend and fake visiting the wife Jeanette. And she saw these big strawberries. The big strawberries, the big mansion, the loaded husband who had the big title. And she wanted all of this. You know what? It reminds me of a line from a movie, Silence of the Lamb. Hannibal Lecter was talking to Clarice and he asked her this question. And that was, how do we begin to covet? And he ends up answering it. We begin by coveting what we see every day. Peeps, great line. Fantastic movie. So true. That chick came to that house every day and she started to covet what Jeanette had. Starting with these big, fancy, fantastic tasting strawberries. Starting there. And she ended up wanting this chick's life. And she ended up taking it. All right, let's continue. Charlotte goes into the parlor where Jacques is sitting, and she's looking around, and Peeps, sister girl, is giddy. Her life is over the top now. Her best life ever dream has come true.
I am a lady now. I'm here. I am here.
You have been here before.
No, but not this way. Before it was sweet Charlotte from the village.
Peeps, that chick told a whole mouthful in that one statement. I am here, she says. And Jacques says, you've been here before, visiting Jeanette. Not this way. Before it was sweet Charlotte from the village, somebody to pass a rainy afternoon with when no one important was around. People, this is how Charlotte saw herself. That's not necessarily how Jeanette saw her. Charlotte saw herself simply as some chick from the village, plain old regular old nobody nothing Charlotte, that the noblewoman indulged when nobody important was around. Peeps, this is how she saw herself, and she's putting this view, this frame on Jeanette. Come on, y'all. Jeanette was a noblewoman with a wealthy husband who had rank and status in the community. Sister girl didn't have to put up with or indulge anybody. If she wanted company on a rainy afternoon, she would simply send a servant out and invite some chicks over for tea. But I guess if you dog out Jeanette, if you label her as unkind and snooty and elitist, then you know what? You can justify treating her wrongly. You can justify sitting up in her house with bad intention. Okay, let's continue. Charlotte finally stops talking about herself, noticing that Jacques is kind of quiet. Charlotte goes over to him and says, has ever the world seen such an unhappy groom? Jacques says, no, it's not that, my dear. It's just that it's been such a strange day. Charlotte says today must have been a strange day for Father Leon, too. He was unhappy. Jacques says he buried Jeanette only 4 months ago. Charlotte yanks her hand away from Jacques and mopes, so no one is happy but the bride. Jacques says, oh, Charlotte, give me a little time. You know that I love you.
You know that I love you. You say that like a mouse. No one at the church but 2 choir boys. And no reception. Had I married the village chimney sweep, I would have had a more gala wedding than this.
I don't know what kind of reception sister girl thought she was going to get from the nobility. Please tell me you did not expect for the town to show up and show out for this wedding 4 months after Jeanette's burial. And these people probably love Jeanette. Girlfriend, don't nobody love you but that man. That's it. Poor Father Leon could barely get the wedding words out of his mouth. They probably tasted like ash on his tongue. Is Jacques saying we agreed to do it this way quietly so there'll be no talk? Brother man, everybody talking about you behind your back. I'm talking about you behind your back. You do not think this whole town and the whole community of nobility is not talking about you behind your back because you married this woman 4 months and you married this chick. Oh no, bro, man, everybody talking about you. Okay? And Charlotte says, and if they talk, what could they say? I mean, I want to show off my new husband. And your new house, Jacques says. Charlotte says, and my new house.
And my new house. Oh, you don't know what it's like to be as poor as a sparrow, but not to feel like a sparrow.
Now, did you catch that, peeps? She was all giddy and happy until she saw that picture hanging on the wall. People, that's Jeanette. Now listen to her.
Actually, I think some of this furniture is rather old.
Not old, my dear. Antique.
Now, all of a sudden, the furniture is looking old. A minute ago, such a girl was practically floating because this was her house now. The problem isn't the furniture or old furniture. The problem, peeps, is that picture hanging on the wall. That's the old thing that's bothering her now. Charlotte goes over and sits at the piano and she starts playing. She glances over to the painting of Jeanette and says, "Am I going to have to look at that 24 hours a day?" Jacques says yes. Charlotte stands up and asks, "Why?" Jacques says, "Remember you were so fond of Jeanette." And Charlotte says, "When wasn't I? Didn't I come to visit her every dreary day of her illness, bringing her soups and custards and jams, and sitting by her bedside to make sure she ate every spoonful?" Jacques jumps up and says, "Charlotte, a little delicacy," and she laughs.
Little delicacy.
Ah, you've changed from the impatient lover who complains so bitterly. Why did it take so long? Why does it take so long?
Charlotte!
And don't talk to me about delicacy.
The servants might overhear.
Charlotte turns away from Jacques and says to the painting, "She was a mouse too, a pretty mouse. You should have been very happy. This chick likes to insult folks by calling them a mouse, which I'm thinking she means you're small and you're weak." And Charlotte continues, "And she was an aristocrat. How did you fall in love with someone so lowly as the widow of a common soldier?" And peeps, they're smooching when the maid in earnest comes in, pushing a cart with food on it. Jacques introduces Rose to Charlotte, and Charlotte says, "I have seen Rose in the market many times. Always the best for the marquis. The best meat, the best vegetables, the best this, the best that." Okay, we can see this chick has like a one-track mind, peeps. She picks up a strawberry and says, "Look at the size of this one," and she takes a bite. And then she says this.
Ernest,
Madame.
take the picture down from the wall.
Very well, Madame la Marquise.
I am so hungry.
Eat, my darling, eat.
It's a bit later in the day, and Jacques is playing the piano. Charlotte asks, "Did Jeanette play the piano very well?" And Jacques looks over to where the painting of Jeanette had been hanging. Peeps, he looks, and then he does this sort of double take, and then he gets up and slowly walks over. And as he's walking, Charlotte asks, "What is it?" Jacques doesn't say anything, he just keeps walking. Then he stops and he stands in front of the place where the painting had been hanging, and he's staring at something on the wall. Charlotte asks again, "What is it?"
Nothing.
Then why do you act as though it was something?
I thought I saw something on the wall.
Peeps, I thought I saw something on the wall too. Next, we see that Charlotte is asleep when she wakes to find Jacques isn't there. She gets up and goes downstairs. Charlotte enters the living room and says, "Jacques, have you lost your mind? What are you doing?" Jacques turns to her and says, "Can't you see it?" Charlotte says, "See what?" And Jacques says, "Look more closely." Charlotte steps over and looks up at the wall. Then she turns to him and says, "It's just a stain." Jacques says, "I thought I saw it after lunch. A while ago, I woke up. I just had to come down here. Something forced me." Charlotte says, "What are you talking about?"
What are you talking about?
Don't you really see what it is?
It's nothing.
It's the outline of a skull.
Come up to bed.
Okay, you know what, peeps? I don't think I saw a skull until he said he saw one. And yeah, now I see it too. Next we see Charlotte apparently being fitted for a dress. You see the seamstress who's fitting her, and we see Ernest standing there taking notes in a notebook. Charlotte is saying, I want platters and platters of wonderful things, meats, fish, and delicate things. And for the wines, the best wines in the cellar. I want them to leave with the stomach ache of their lives. Peeps, I don't know if you can really see it, but Ernest is giving this chick some kind of a look.
Will that be all, Madame la Marquise?
Before Charlotte can respond, Jacques comes busting into the room and he tells both the seamstress and Ernest to leave. Peeps, Charlotte doesn't even see that there's something wrong with her husband's face. She asks instead, do I look like a real marquis now? Peeps, the term marquis is a noble title. It's a ranking just under a duke or a duchess. So her being married to Jacques really is a big deal. And people, that's all she cares about. She wants to talk about the party, and Jacques cuts her off and says, Charlotte, I tell you it's worse. It's much worse today. The wall again, she says. And Jacques says, you've got to come and see it. It's so much clearer now. Rose has been scrubbing at it for an hour. You've got to come and see it. You've got to see it again. Charlotte says, come and see what? Jacques says, oh, for the love of heaven, Charlotte, come and see it. Charlotte throws up her hands and say, all right, let's go and see it. They go downstairs to find Rose standing on a ladder, scrubbing away at this stain on the wall. Rose sees them and she climbs down.
I scrubbed it for 2 hours this morning. I have tried everything, lye even.
It is probably some water seeping through the wall.
Then wouldn't it be damp, madame?
Peeps, that mark is strangely beginning to look like a face to me. And this whole thing is a mystery. It shows up out of nowhere, and now you can't get rid of it. Charlotte is trying to simplify everything, and she says to Rose, when you were a little child, did you ever play a silly game? You know, like looking at a stain on a wall or the ceiling and imagining it to be something other than a stain, like a butterfly or an elephant or a ballerina in a little skirt. Rose smiles and says, yes, madame, I remember that game. And Charlotte asks, well, what does the stain remind you of? Rose turns to look at it.
Rose, I told you to leave.
Yes, Monsieur le Marquis.
But why won't it wash out? Look at it, can't you see? More and more, it's becoming Jeannette.
Jeannette!
Peeps, his guilty conscience is getting to him. He sees Jeanette's face. Charlotte doesn't feel any guilt at all, which is why I believe she doesn't see anything but a stain on the wall. Charlotte says, I think you need a doctor. I think you're beginning to have a little fever, and I would like for you to be well for my party. See, this chick got a one-track mind. And Jacques says, there won't be any party. We must lock this room up until we find out what this is. Charlotte says, this is such nonsense. You're talking like a little boy. Jacques says, but what is it? Charlotte looks over at the wall and says, it's a stain in the stone. Jacques says, it's not in the stone. Charlotte gives him this look and says, no, it's your conscience, and that is dangerous. Charlotte calls for Ernest, and Jacques says,
I know it will finally be her face. The way she looked just before she died, when she realized what we had done to her. You remember how she looked? The terror in her eyes. How could you even think of having people in here?
Peeps, Brother Man is running down the road with this, and the car is out of control. He's saying at some point, Jeanette realized what they were doing to her. Were they offing a sister with poison? And she figured it out at the end? Ernest comes into the room and Charlotte says, Rose seems to be unable to get this stain off the wall. It would look very bad for our guests. And the spot looks empty. And she's saying to Ernest, what should we do about it? Ernest says, well, if I may suggest, we should cover it. Charlotte says, with what? With a picture? And then she turns to Jacques and says, would you mind very much if we hang Jeanette's picture just for tonight? Really, girlfriend? You cray-cray. You hang that picture up and some gonna jump off tonight. Okay, let's continue.
Get the picture.
Charlotte, can't we call the party off? I'm so worried.
Yes, I know, and that makes me worry. About you.
I'm so frightened.
You are losing control.
Peeps, Brother Man is begging her to put this party off for another time. Sister Girl says no. And you want to know what else she says? I didn't marry you to bury myself alive in this house. Wow. It's later in the evening and the party appears to be over. Jacques is standing there staring at the picture of Jeanette, and the priest is sitting in a chair looking at him. Charlotte comes into the room and sees the priest and says, I thought I had said goodnight to all of my guests. The priest stands and says, I'll be going. Charlotte steps over to him and says, Jacques, aren't you going to say goodnight to the father? Then she says, what a host you've been. You've been standing here all evening long, just standing here. Charlotte turns to the priest and says, when he has a little too much wine, he becomes like a statue. Perhaps we should put him in the public park and let the children dance around him. You know what? This chick is full of little jabs and little digs. Brother Man, you've been played. This chick never loved you. Your house, yeah. Your title, yeah. Your position, most assuredly. But never you. The priest steps over to him and says, good night, my son. And Jacques says,
don't go. Help me.
Help you? How?
The priest sits, and peeps, Jacques is coming apart. This whole face on the wall thing has driven him over the edge, and he's starting to lose it. And Charlotte realizes if she doesn't get Brother Man under control, this whole jig is gonna be up.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I can see it on the wall.
Enough!
Through the picture.
Enough! Alice!
Madame.
Help the Marquis upstairs.
Well, this has sort of gone off the rails. This priest is no fool, peeps. He knows something serious is up. Charlotte is trying to play it off by saying Brother Man has had a little too much to drink, and the priest is all serious in the face, and he says, yes, of course, it's the wine. But, Brother Man, please, has been sitting right there in that chair all evening long, staring at Jacques' back the whole time. The priest says good night, and he walks out the door, and people, Charlotte is standing there, and you can imagine the wheels turning in her head. This dude is gonna give up the whole deal, and they're both gonna end up being done for. Oh no, Charlotte can't have that, because back in the day, it was either hanging or lopping off your head. I'm sure Charlotte is saying to herself, she's got to get this thing under control. Charlotte is going up the stairs, and peeps, we can see that she's walking slowly and thinking. She enters the bedroom, and Jacques is standing, looking out the window. He's dressed ready for bed. Charlotte goes over to the bureau, and she's taking off her jewelry. Jacques says,
I can't go on. What am I to do?
Would you like something to make you sleep?
I think I would.
I'll go down to the kitchen and fix you some hot chocolate.
I want it to work quickly, not like Jeanette.
And there you have it, peeps. They did, in fact, poison Jeanette. Charlotte is apparently satisfied with the solution, and she goes downstairs to make the hot chocolate. Jacques has gone downstairs himself, and Charlotte brings the cup of hot chocolate to him. She hands him the cup and tells him to drink it all. It'll make him feel so much better. This chick is something else. He takes a sip, then he tells Charlotte to look at the wall. And peeps, I already caught a glimpse of this wall, or I'd be screaming right along with this chick.
Drink it all. It will make you feel so much better.
I know it will. Charlotte,
What?
look at the wall.
Oh, the wall.
The police inspector goes over and picks up the cup, and he smells it. Jacques says, I didn't have enough courage to do more than just take a sip. Now I must find the courage enough to face the guillotine. Eh, Inspector? The inspector turns to him and says, did she touch any of this? And Jacques says no. It must have been her heart, the shock. She dropped to the floor like a stone after seeing it.
Don't touch it! I had to cover it. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it.
You couldn't stand what?
John Newland, the host, ends the episode with this. Marquis de Rose went to the guillotine insisting that there was an image on this wall, and at his trial, his servants swore under oath that something was on the wall, something that could not be removed. In the village, there are those who will tell you that on the anniversary of her death, the face of Jeanette sometimes reappears. And so there you have it, my peeps. One Step Beyond episode, Image of Death. Peeps, what I found so enjoyable about this episode is that Charlotte was so conniving, and she really didn't try to hide it. If Jacques had half a brain in his head, he would have realized from jump that Charlotte wasn't into him. She was into his wealth and his position. I love that this episode is purported to be an actual real event, and I love that in the end, Jeanette found a way from the grave to avenge her being off by these two people. Well, my people, I hope you all enjoyed this, as I really do enjoy bringing these old programs to you. To my subscribers, thanks so much for the commitment, and to my viewers, I so appreciate you as well. Would you consider subscribing and joining this little village of ours? To all, please give me a like to keep the channel on the move, okay? Now, stay healthy, be kind to one another, and show somebody some love today. And while you're at it, show yourself some kindness. Y'all be sweet now, and I'll see you next time.